वेलकम टू फ्री लर्न यूनिवर्सिटी। मेरा नाम राहुल हसन। स्टूडेंट बात करने वाले हैं BGC 101 के बारे में, जो आपका यूनिट 2 है, उसका ब्लॉक 1 का यूनिट 2 उसका हम लोग पढ़ने वाले हैं। और इस चैप्टर का जो नाम है वो आप देख लेते हैं। ये टोटल इसमें टोटल BGC 101 में टोटल आपका 4 ब्लॉक है, टोटल 16 चैप्टर्स है। पर ब्लॉक में टोटल 4-4 यूनिट्स हैं। तो इस चैप्टर का नाम है कालिदासा एंड ओवरव्यू, जिसमें कि हम लोग इंट्रोडक्शन, कालिदासा बैकग्राउंड के बारे में बात करेंगे, कालिदास के लिटरेरी बैकग्राउंड, उसके उनके काम के बारे में, एपिक ड्रामा के बारे में, एंसेंट इंडियन एथिस्टिक्स के बारे में। और ये बहुत सारी चीज़ें हैं जो कालिदासा से रिलेटेड है। कैसे महाभारत को अपनाया उन्होंने, बहुत सारी चीज़ें हैं, कैसे उन्होंने अपनी स्टोरी को नरेट किया। तो इस वीडियो का पार्ट 1 अपलोड हो चुका है, आपको डिस्क्रिप्शन में लिंक मिल जाएगा और आप प्ले लिस्ट चेक कर सकते हैं, आई बटन भी चेक कर सकते हैं। और बाकी हम इसको भी प्ले कर देते हैं ऑडियो फॉर्मेट में, जो रोबोटिक्स ऑडियो फॉर्मेट है माइक्रोसॉफ्ट एज को आप खुद से भी कर सकते हैं। नहीं तो आप इस वीडियो को 2x या 1.75x किसी भी तरीके से आप प्ले करके पूरे ऑडियो को सुन सकते हैं। जस्ट अ मिनट।
Unit 2 Kalidasa, an overview. Structure 2.0 Objectives 2.1 Introduction 2.2 Kalidasa's background 2nd February 2001 The problem of date 2nd February 2002 The city of Ujjain and its relevance in Kalidasa 2.3 Kalidasa, literary background 2.4 Kalidasa and his works 2.5 Epic and Drama 2nd May 2001 The original story of Shakuntala from the Epic Mahabharata 2nd May 2002 The question of form 2.6 Ancient Indian Aesthetics 2nd June 2001 Dramatic Art 2nd June 2002 Bharata's Natyashastra 2.7 Let us sum up 2.8 Hints to check your progress 2.9 Glossary 2.0 Objectives. This unit will acquaint you with Kalidasa, the man, the myth and the creative genius. It will also lead us into a discussion on the probable time of Kalidasa and the place where he lived. In addition, Kalidasa's literary influences would be mapped to help us place the poet in the vast expanse of ancient literature. For a precise understanding of Kalidasa's art, attempt has also been made in this unit to take a closer look at the original story of Shakuntala available in the Epic Mahabharata. We will also see, at a more general level, how the play, Abhijnana Shakuntalam of Kalidasa departs from the original source of the epic. A critical discussion on aspects of epic and drama might make us aware about the workings of the two forms genres in question, the epic and the drama. Finally, a view of ancient Indian aesthetics will apprise us of what was being written during the ancient period and the parameters against which literary texts were judged. 2.1 Introduction. Very little information is available on Kalidasa the person. The result of research done on him is based on associations and references that are available in works identified to have been written by him. Kalidasa's texts help us understand his world and they give us clues to his time. Generally, in approaching a text, our movement of inquiry is from the outside world of the writer to the inside world of the text. In the case of Kalidasa, however, the opposite takes place. Because we have scarce information about his surroundings, we are forced to look at his text first and then make our impression about the world he inhabited. Hence, an inversion takes place in the case of Kalidasa. In Kalidasa, the movement is thus from inside the textual world outwards, and it makes interpreting and finding meaning more exploratory and open-ended, there being no predetermined ideas influencing the view of Kalidasa. Secondly, Kalidasa. 12. Kalidada, Abhijnana Shakuntala appears conscious about the existing literary trends and stylistics. This helped him focus on the themes associated with courtly life as well as with the gods. His subject was lofty. It is believed he was among the 9 gems Navratnas, in the court of Chandragupta II, and as a court poet he followed the tradition of courtly drama with an eye on the whims and fancies of the nobility. Was, then, Kalidasa an elitist poet? Interestingly, Kalidasa emphasizes poignant human emotions in his works, This might have struck a chord with the ordinary people. Yet, Kalidasa should be seen under the larger paradigm of classical writing. 2.2 Kalidasa's background. It is still important that we try and place Kalidasa, and locate him in some time frame, so let's try and do that. Since Kalidasa belonged to the ancient period and much of information about it has been lost over centuries, it is difficult to gain the required details. In fact, dates alluding to his time of birth span centuries. Scholarship on his probable dates varies. 2 February 2001 The problem of date. It is believed, for instance, that Kalidasa was a court poet of Agnimitra Sangha, 2nd century BC, who lived during the years of the Sangha Empire 184 BC to 78 BC. According to the belief, Kalidasa made Agnimitra Sangha the protagonist of his first play Malviknagnimitran. Another view of Kalidasa's period places him in 1st century BC during the reign of Vikramaditya of Ujjain, around 57 BCT. Thus, Kalidasa was associated with King Vikramaditya, who was the poet's patron. A third opinion establishes Kalidasa's date between the 4th and 5th centuries AD, the age of Chandragupta II, who assumed the title of Chandragupta Vikramaditya after his winning spree in western India. The lack of knowledge about Kalidasa works both as an advantage and disadvantage. The disadvantage is that it leaves us completely in the dark about the writer's ethos. We cannot take help from his surroundings to correlate them with events that take place in his works. It restricts us to the text per se. However, the advantage is that knowing little about Kalidasa's time frees us from the binds of historicity, and we are constrained to delve deeper into his texts. 2 February 2002 The city of Ujjain and its relevance in Kalidasa. It emerges from the settings of Kalidasa's works that he was greatly inspired by the natural beauty of the Malwa region in central India. His fondness for Ujjain particularly comes to the fore in the way he describes the city. Chandra Rajan has keenly delineated how the topography of Malwa might have shaped Kalidasa's imagination. She says, the poet describes the topography of the Vindhyas and the Malwa region with a loving exactitude, as if the landscape lay on the palm of his hand. Malwa, in central India, now part of Madhya Pradesh, is watered by many rivers and streams, rising from the Vindhya ranges and draining its slopes and valleys. Malwa's landscapes streaked by its many rivers and streams with glades and pleasure gardens on their banks, dotted with groves and meadows and woodlands stretching. 13. Along the slopes of the hills, its holy spots and long low hills containing caves overgrown with bushes, stir the poet's imagination and evoke in us the beauty that once was. The Loom of Time, 26. This tells us that Kalidasa has depicted with immense pride scenes from Ujjain in his works. It has made Kalidasa's imagery highly evocative. Ujjain with its picturesque sites was also a cultural and commercial hub. It was the center of learning and intellectual movements where music and the arts were given primacy. While living in Ujjain, Kalidasa was directly in touch with the harmony of nature and the world of art associated with the court. The latter also lent high aesthetic appeal to his works. Additionally, Ujjain was a center of scientific learning during the period. Amartya Sen importantly brings to our notice the fact that the city of Ujjain, in the early centuries of the first millennium CE, was the location of the principal meridian for Indian calendars, serving for Indian astronomers as something like an Indian Greenwich. Talking of astronomy, Sen adds, technical development clearly had much to do with the location of imperial power as well as scientific research at the time. Ujjain, or Ujjayini as it was then called, as an ancient city moved from its role as the capital of Avanti, later Malwa, in the 7th century BCE to become the capital of the Saka royalty, and most prominently served as the base of the later Gupta dynasty. In the period of the flowering of Indian mathematics and science, the argumentative Indian, 40-1. Along with mathematical and scientific studies, Ujjain had to its credit a rich literary tradition of which Kalidasa was a part. This is corroborated by E. M. Forster in his essay, 9 Gems of Ujjain. Certainly, there was no dearth of wealth in Ujjain. In fact, the palaces and gardens described in Kalidasa convey the sense of that splendor which the city carried. We note that Kalidasa instills both optimism and pride in his characters that seem to be leading organized lives and amassing resources at the same time. An immense scope for progress and riches is discernible in Kalidasa's works that conveys the sense of optimism that the period conveyed. This lends an epic quality to his works as the great feats of kings and the glory of their kingdom become important markers of assertion in Kalidasa. The great poet was guided in this by the patronage he received from his benefactors. The plays of Kalidasa were performed in court during festivities. This made his preference for lofty subjects justifiable. Even though Kalidasa was a court poet, he was extremely sensitive to the emotions, feelings of those who lived in humble dwellings, in distant corners of the land, away from the court and where the king resided. We note often that Kalidasa presents a critique of duty and decorum that represses the passions of an individual. What makes Kalidasa stand out amongst writers is that he expresses nuances of human emotions buried deep in the heart of simple men and women. Let us examine Kalidasa's literary background next. 2.3 Kalidasa's literary background. Kalidasa as a literator was steeped in philosophy, aesthetics, and grammar. We know this after a careful reading of his The Loom of Time and other works. Kalidas, an overview. 14. Kalidada, Abhijnana Shakuntala. He was influenced by the epics the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, from which he often drew material for his compositions. Borrowing tales and stories from popular epics was a regular practice among writers of ancient India. Bhasa, for instance, deployed tales from the Mahabharata and wove dramatic plots around them. Bhasa's plays Urubangam, Karne Bharam are examples of this. Kalidasa in his prologue to his first play Malviknagnimitram acknowledges Bhasa, the ancient dramatist, as one of the greatest playwrights of Sanskrit literature, saying, "How can the work of the modern poet Kalidasa be more esteemed than the works of Bhasa, Kaviputra, Soamilaka and others of established fame?" The issue is explained thus by Kalidasa: everything is not praiseworthy just because it is old, nor should a poetical work be dismissed just because it is new. QTD in Haksar. Kalidasa is conscious of the value of art and asserts that it is not dependent on antiquity. He uses the rational principle to derive at what is praiseworthy in literature. He emphasized the great value of Bhasa's works. Haksar has observed, Bhasa was already well known on the Indian scene over 1500 years ago, when Kalidasa had just begun to make his mark. Haksar 9. Both Bhasa and Kalidasa, along with Bana Bhatta, the first Sanskrit novelist and court poet of 7th century Kannauj, North India, contributed to the literary canon of classical Sanskrit literature. Jaydev of the 13th century had the following to say of the trio in his work Prasanna Raghava: "Who will not delight in the muse of poetry, the lovely maid whose laughter is Bhasa, the guru of poets, whose sport of pleasure is Kalidasa, whose cupid is Bana." QTD in Haksar, Kiss Smiley. It is evident that Kalidasa had studied Bharata's Natyashastra as well, although the other theory that goes around suggests that it was Bharata that learned from Kalidasa and wrote a treatise on drama based on representations in Kalidasa's plays. Chandra Rajan has said this emphatically. To quote, "It is possible that the author of the Natyashastra sat down to compose his treatise with Kalidasa's plays before him. That a writer of Kalidasa's genius and accomplishment would write according to the book is not very likely. It seems more plausible that a critic and theorist would draw upon the work of a great writer to formulate his theories. Rajan, 29. Nonetheless, Kalidasa successfully evokes the various rasas in his plays that add value to a scene or character. This aspect would be discussed in some detail later. In the next section we shall take a quick look at Kalidasa's other works. 2.4 Kalidasa and his works. Kalidasa was a dramatist, an epic writer and a poet. The plots of his plays are based on the known adventures of kings, even as legends and folk tales inspired his poetic works. Kalidasa gave depth to his works by making his characters multidimensional and expanding their scope with imaginative flights. In his writing, characters appear layered, and their actions are governed by well-conceived notions of beauty. Importantly, Kalidasa is a secular voice in a largely conservative culture. His secular sense comes from his emphasis on the rational approach to life that consciously integrated pleasure with lofty ideals. This made the writer look at events from a specific view of reality as it was. 15. Being lived out at the time, and not through the lens of fossilized ideas borrowed from the past. It is Kalidasa's humanism that makes his works secular. His works are largely relatable. Even as Kalidasa wrote in the ancient period, we identify with the pains and joys of his characters as well as situations because the writer stirs our basic emotions and feelings. This connects us to the world of Kalidasa. As a playwright, he gives voice to his characters that remain insignificant in common life but gain significance in his hands. 7 of Kalidasa's works have survived the test of time. Among these we have 3 long lyrical poems, 3 plays, and an incomplete epic. The poems believed to have been written by Kalidasa include Ritusamharam, Gathering of the Seasons, Kumarsambhavam, The Birth of Kumara, and Meghdootam, The Cloud Messenger. Kalidasa is best known for the long lyrical poem Meghdootam. Among the plays, we have Malviknagnimitram, Malvika and Agnimitra, his first play, Vikramorvasiyam, Urvasi won by valor, Abhijnana Shakuntala, the recognition of Shakuntala, the third in the order. Finally, Kalidasa wrote an epic he could not complete, titled Raghuvansam, Raghu's dynasty. Ritusamharam being Kalidasa's early work appears to be art in the making. In it, the poet brings to life each season and its impact on the landscape. He captures the beautiful imagery in a stylized form while attempting to make it appear natural in the poem. Such experiments with the lyric form refined the literary art of Kalidasa further. His skills as a creative writer and particularly a poet were perfected by the time he wrote his last poem Meghdootam, which is a Dutakavyam or messenger poem. Here, Kalidasa charts out the agony of a yaksh who has been separated from his beloved due to a curse, he being cursed by his lord Kuber for neglecting his duties. The yaksh persuades the cloud to take his message to his wife. Hence, the poem's title, The Cloud Messenger. Duty and human will desire always clash with one another in Kalidasa. In fact, in his play Vikramorvasiyam, Kalidasa projects a double curse directed at Urvasi for the neglect of work duty, because she is caught up in deep passionate thoughts about the king. The curse element in Kalidasa is important because it is a form of punishment given to characters that become disoriented towards duty and follow their passions, just as the Yaksa in Meghdootam or Shakuntala in Abhijnana Shakuntala or Urvashi in Vikramorvasiyam. In the next section we shall look at the difference between the two genres, the epic and the drama, and also see how the Shakuntala story in the Mahabharata differs or is the same as the play Shakuntala. Check your progress 1-1. What makes Kalidasa a secular humanist? Give reasons for your answer. 2.5 Epic and Drama. Shakuntala's narrative is described at length in the Epic Mahabharata under the section Shakuntalopakyana, from the Adiparva or the Book of the Beginning. It is recounted as one among the many ancestral legends of the Puru lineage by Vasampayana to Janamejaya on the occasion of a sacrificial ritual. Kalidasa, an overview. 16. Kalidasa, Abhijnana Shakuntala 2nd May 2001 The original story of Shakuntala from the Epic Mahabharata. This narrative is focused on discovering who the Bharatas were. The answer is, they were descendants of Bharata, born of Shakuntala and Dusanta, a Paurava king. The focus of the narrative is on Dusanta, and the significance of Shakuntala is limited to her son who would be the prospective heir to Dusanta's throne. In the epic, Dusanta is projected as the triumphant king, who is the equal of Indra, slayer of foes, warder of enemy elephants. They thought of him as the thunderbolt wielder himself. Boetnen 57. The story in the epic goes as follows. King Dusanta, while pursuing a deer, enters the depths of forest and chances upon a holy hermitage that appears to him as Indra's paradise. Here, no tree lacked bloom or fruit, and no tree was thorny. The wilderness was an idyllic picture. Dusanta reaches the sanctum of the ascetic Kamvan Kasyapa to pay his respects. But there, instead of Kamvan, he finds his adopted daughter Shakuntala. Dusanta is immediately smitten by the beauty of the maiden. He saw that she had beautiful hips, a lustrous appearance, and a charming smile. She was radiant with beauty, with the sheen of austerities and the calm of self-restraint. 161. He then asks her about her parentage. Shakuntala narrates the story of her birth as she heard it from Kamvan once upon a time. She is the daughter of an Apsara, Menka, and the austere ascetic Vishwamitra. On birth, Menka abandons her and goes back to the realm of the gods, to Indra. Shakuntala, according to her own narrative, is then found by the saint Kamvan. Having heard her tale, King Dusanta reaffirms that Shakuntala couldn't have been an ordinary maiden. He coaxes her to enter into a Gandharv marriage with him, a marriage done in secret, with rituals, between a loving man and a loving woman. Shakuntala agrees on one condition. She asks the king to promise that the son that may be born from me shall be young king to succeed you, great king. Declare this to me as the truth. If it is to be thus, Dusanta, you may lie with me. He agrees, and the two consummate their marriage. Thereafter, the king returns to court. Shakuntala in the following year gives birth to a son at Saint Kamvan's hermitage. The child, radiant like a blazing fire, grows up in the hermitage for 6 years. He would fetter lions and tigers to the trees around the hermitage. Watching his superhuman exploits, Kamvan decides to send him to the king's palace with Shakuntala. At the king's palace, Dusanta refuses to acknowledge Shakuntala, calling her an evil ascetic. Shakuntala, stunned with grief, pleads her case, emphasizing the importance of a son for the king. She says, a son is a putra because he saves his father from the hell named Put, and calls herself the dutiful wife, stating that she is a wife who is handy in the house, she is a wife who bears children, she is a wife whose life is her husband. 167. Dusanta humiliates Shakuntala in the following way. I do not know that this is my son you have borne, Shakuntala. Women are liars, who will trust your word? Menka, your mother, was a merciless slut who cast you off like a faded garland on a peak of the Himalayas. Vishwamitra, your merciless father, who born a baron, reached for Brahmanhood, was a lecher. 168. 17. Shakuntala hears out Dusanta, points out his forgetfulness and describes her higher lineage. My birth is higher than yours, Dusanta. You walk on earth, great king, but I fly the skies. She finally comes back to the issue of her son and warns Dusanta. The ancestors call a son the foundation of family and lineage, the highest of all merits of law, therefore one should never abandon a son. 168. Having said all this, Shakuntala departs, and a celestial voice warns Dusanta of his wrong deed. At this, Dusanta changes his stance, suggesting, I myself knew very well he was my son. But if I had taken him as my son on her word alone, suspicion would have been rife among the people and he would never have been cleared of it. 169. Therefore, Dusanta suggests that he has to play the fraudulent game of rebuking her. With this, Dusanta accepts his son and Shakuntala and brings them both to the court, declaring the latter the young king. Check your progress to 1. How was the story of Shakuntala narrated in the Mahabharata? Who was the central figure in that narrative? 2nd May 2002. The question of form. Is there a difference between the story narrated in the Mahabharata and its representation in Kalidasa's play? Kalidasa takes up the story from the Mahabharata, works on it, fleshes it out and makes it into a play. The basic difference is that the form of the legend is different. In the Mahabharata, the story is narrated in an epic fashion, and in the play the plot is laid out for use on the stage. As we read the play, we recognize that there is a basic difference in telling and showing in the two forms respectively. Does something change if the form of the plot is a narrative or a drama? When the story is narrated in an epic and later acted out as a play, does it undergo modification? What exactly alters with the change of the form genre? Let us bear in mind that when the form genre of the plot changes, the story assumes a new pattern. In the case of drama, dialogues become central, and for that reason a character's inner dynamics comes to the fore. The epic may have dialogues, too, but it is governed by the requirements of the narrative. As far as the play is concerned, characters take over and speak that which follows their motivation. Later, in view of different motivations clashing with one another, the dramatic action moves following the dictates of the changing scenario. The play, thus, invites the reader-viewer to imaginatively participate in the action on stage. In the play, there is no direct judgment to tell the audience what is to be followed and why. This is at variance with what happens in an epic, where the narrative has the reins on the evolving action, at each stage interpreting the goings-on. The play works as a stimulus for intellectual debate that is played out on the stage as well as in the minds of the audience. Also, characters in a play are allowed more space to live out the moment, which is not possible in the epic. Further, the play is a continuum, unlike the epic where episodes have a character of their own. These are interpreted by the audience depending on their individual merit at the specific moment. Kalidas, an overview. 18. Kalidasa, Abhijnana Shakuntala. While changing the form genre, Kalidasa retells the story differently. With this, the emphasis of his work changes. As he lays out the story from the Mahabharata for representation on stage, he assigns to it new parameters involving scenes, small acts of individual characters, and the interplay of situations in the format of showing and representing. What does one mean by the playwright's emphasis here? It is those aspects in a text that receive special focus at the cost of those that are pushed into the background. The playwright consciously picks up a point for expansion and gives more space to it than others. Emphases are based on the playwright's sympathies and preferences. Think of the title of the work, Abhijnana Shakuntalam, i.e., the recognition of Shakuntala. Kalidasa makes it clear where his sympathies lie and who the protagonist of the play will be. That a woman will be the hero of the story reveals the position of the playwright. In the Mahabharata, the section of Shakuntala comes under the head of the origins. Even as the title of the section is Shakuntala, in the Mahabharata, it is Shakuntala as the beautiful maiden and later Bharata's mother that gets foregrounded. As a consequence, the king is at the center. He is the active agent in the episode. That is not the case with Kalidasa's Shakuntala. In Kalidasa's Abhijnana Shakuntalam, Shakuntala is the central character, whose feelings and thoughts are elaborated in great detail by the playwright. The play revolves around her travails and fights. For now, suffice it to say that the story of Shakuntala undergoes a sea of change in the hands of Kalidasa, both because the emphasis of the text shifts and because the form of representation changes. Let us now take a look at the dramatic art more specifically. We should also look at ancient Indian aesthetics, as aesthetics dictate to aspects of drama. Check your progress 3.1. Write a comparative note on the epic and the drama, keeping in mind their specific features. 2.6 Ancient Indian aesthetics. Dramatic art in ancient India held an appeal as no other art form did. Recitations of folk tales and epics gradually came to include enactments. The form of drama in Sanskrit literature particularly included aspects of dance, music and acting. It was performative in an inclusive sense as it freely used gestures, mimes and dance postures. Dance and drama during the period were not viewed as distinct forms. 2 June 2001 Dramatic art. Drama was a mix of many elements. It was an art form that included lyrical and narrative modes, verse and prose, speech, song and acting, masks, costume and ornaments. Together these provided a distinct stylization to drama in the ancient period. At the point of time when Kalidasa wrote his plays, the dramatic form had emerged on the literary horizon. The process has been observed as follows. 19. Many of the elements of drama were already in place at a very early time, perhaps by the middle of the first millennium BC, at the time of Panini, the great grammarian who was also a poet. With various traditions converging around this time, the literary tradition of the Vedas and epics, the popular and folk play traditions centering perhaps around vegetation rites and festivals such as sowing and harvesting, the ritual drama and the dance with its storyline, it was inevitable that drama as we understand it should have been evolving into its final form. Rajan 33. It is suggested that in the ancient period the popular and folk traditions were extensively deployed in performances during festivals. These popular forms close to the life of everyday people were used even in court dramas that eventually took shape over the centuries to follow. Court drama took elements from the four Vedas so that it became a source of high learning as well. Amartya Sen's comment on the Vedas offers a useful insight into the nature of writing at the time. For Sen, the Vedas may be full of hymns and religious invocations, but they also tell stories, speculate about the world and, true to the argumentative propensity already in view, ask difficult questions. A basic doubt concerns the very creation of the world. Did someone make it? Was it a spontaneous emergence? And is there a God who knows what really happened? 132. To be sure, the way we visualize the ancient past of India is different from the way the ancients looked at themselves. Far from being rigid, the Vedas appear to be open-ended and preserves the exploratory spirit. Speaking specifically about the Rigveda, Sen has added. The Rigveda goes on to express radical doubts on these issues. Who really knows? Who will here proclaim it? Whence was it produced? Whence is this creation? Perhaps it formed itself, or perhaps it did not. The one who looks down on it, in the highest heaven, only he knows, or perhaps he does not know. These doubts from the 2nd millennium BCE would recur again and again in India's long argumentative history, along with a great many other questions about epistemology and ethics. 132. That the Rigveda, the first Veda, expresses radical doubts about the basic questions of life makes it clear that India's ancient past was more heterogeneous and secular. The aesthetic of the period reflects that spirit, too. This gets projected in the theory of drama presented as a treatise by Bharata in the Natyashastra. This obviously demands a brief look at the Natyashastra next. 2 June 2002 Bharata's Natyashastra. Natyashastra, the Poetics of Drama, is a treatise on the dramatic art that attempts to outline the aim, purpose and role of drama in ancient India. The treatise includes specific features and elements considered integral to Sanskrit drama. Natya carries the root word, nat, which means to act or emote. It may be applied to both drama and dance, as natya is also the word for dancing or dramatic representation and natak denotes a play. Natyashastra is the oldest text on the theory of drama that has survived for centuries. Bharata termed it the fifth Veda. He has claimed. Kalidasa, an overview. 20. Kalidasa, Abhijnana Shakuntala. I shall make a fifth Veda on the Natya with the semi-historical tales, Itihasa, which will conduce to duty, dharma, wealth, artha, as well as fame, will contain good counsel and collection of other material for human well-being, will give guidance to people of the future as well in all their actions, will be enriched by the teaching of all scriptures, sastra, and will give a review of all arts and crafts, silpa. QTD, in Nagpal 55. Note that it is meant to be a Veda, i.e. crystallized knowledge of supreme importance on the aspect of nature that is drama. Drama occupied an important position in the ancient period. It was an essential source of learning. For this reason, Bharata claimed that drama based on his treatise will conduce people to duty, bring them on the path of dharma and provide guidance to people of the future. The suggestion here is that Bharat pictures the afterlife of his text much like the Vedas were considered in his own time. He believes that Natyashastra too would hold similar importance. Nonetheless, the focus is on offering knowledge through the agency of drama. Thus, drama was meant to be didactic in nature even as it entertained the audience in the process. To teach and to delight became the central aim of dramatic art in the hands of critics and writers of Sanskrit literature. Interestingly, Bharata notes that the fifth Veda, Natyashastra, would be accessible to all unlike the first four Vedas that were and maybe still are denied to women and Shudras. For Bharata, Natyashastra could be read by anyone. What is the significance of this? Such an exercise would make scriptures and literature human-centered and approachable. The Natyashastra provides 10 different types of dramatic representations that are determined by factors of length of a play, theme, plot and characters. Nataka and Prakarn belong to the category of full-length plays of 5 to 10 acts that have as their subject plots taken from histories and fictional stories respectively. On the other hand, there are bhanas that are satirical monologues and dwell on superficial or less important themes. Between these extremes, the treatise fits in tragedies and comedies that may have 1 to 4 acts and the subject is of relative importance. These include among others Samvaka and Ihamaga, that have less than 5 acts but deal with divine themes, Vyayog and Anka, 1-act plays based on a single day's event. The Natyashastra was meant to take elements from the first 4 Vedas and include these under one head. It ventured to draw from the Rigveda the recitative quality, from the Yajurveda, histrionic representation, from the Atharvaveda, rituals and style, and from the Samaveda the rasas. Importantly, the Natyashastra is best known for expounding the theory of rasas, which is particularly relevant for us in understanding the aesthetic sensibility of Kalidasa. The peculiar sensibility of Kalidasa will be focused in the next section. Let us first understand the theory of rasa. For Sheldon Pollock, rasa is that which can be savored. To him, Bharata's language often clearly suggests that his analytical focus is on rasa in the character. The comic, for example, is seen to exist for the most part in women and characters of low status, not in the response of the viewer. Moreover, Bharata's conception of the casual process, bhavas, or emotions, are the factors that manifest the rasa, implies, or at least later is taken to imply, the pre-existence of rasa in the character and hence the character's analytical primacy. 49. 21. Bharata provides us with a list of 8 rasas: the erotic, sriga, the comic, hasya, the furious, roidra, the pathetic, karuna, the heroic, veer, the marvelous, adbhut, the odious, bibhatsa, and the terrible, bhayanak. All these have their specific importance in the writer's scheme of things. Among these, the rasa of sriga reigns supreme. This is because sriga is the rasa of pleasure and beauty. Check your progress for 1. What was the purpose of dramatic art in the ancient period as discussed by Bharat Muni in his Natyashastra? 2.7 Let us sum up. This unit has brought into focus aspects of ancient Indian drama. It has offered a discussion on Kalidasa's probable time and culture. In this discussion, an attempt has been made to provide a view of Kalidasa's literary background that would enable us to understand the larger context of ancient Indian aesthetics. This in turn led us to an overview of Kalidasa, creative oeuvre. A general view of Bharata's Natyashastra has been provided and his concepts of drama touched upon since they make the backbone of ancient Sanskrit drama. Apart from these, the question of form has been taken up and particularly the forms of epic and drama have been compared in the context of Kalidasa. We also gained a view of the original story that was written in the Mahabharata and later adapted by Kalidasa for his dramatic work. 2.8 Hints to check your progress. Check your progress 1.1. Read section 2.4. Check your progress 2.1. Read section 2nd May 2001. Check your progress 3.1. Read section 2nd May 2002. Check your progress 4.1. Read section 2.6, 2nd June 2001 and 2nd June 2002. 2.9 Glossary Topography. The material place with its specific features, the physical characteristics of a region. Yaksa is an ancient spirit that guarded nature and was worshipped as a deity of groves and water sources. Kalidas, an overview.
तो उम्मीद है आपने पूरे वीडियो को देखा होगा, पूरे वीडियो को आपने सुना होगा। अगर आप यहाँ तक आ गए हैं तो धन्यवाद आपके लिए। आप का ये चैप्टर कंप्लीट हो गया होगा मेरे हिसाब से। और इस चैप्टर में हमने क्या बातें की हम लोग पहले बात कर चुके हैं। जो कुछ इंपॉर्टेंट क्वेश्चन है आप इस के बीच से आप निकाल सकते हैं। और बाकी अगर आप ज़्यादा इन्फॉर्मेशन लेना चाहते हैं तो आप हमारे टेलीग्राम में ज्वाइन कर सकते हैं, आपको डिस्क्रिप्शन में लिंक मिल जाएगा। थैंक्स फॉर वॉचिंग।